with the Department of Planning and Development. Along with me is Sarah Godfrey, the Community Engagement Coordinator with the Department of Planning and Development. And today we're going to be giving you a briefing on the current Reston Comprehensive Plan Study and Amendment, which is currently underway. What we're going to do is provide you with a presentation on the study process to date, give an overview of the proposed Reston Comprehensive Plan text, discuss the next steps, and then allow time for any questions regarding the current study. So what you're seeing now is kind of just the agenda. We're into welcome introductions right now. Again, I'm going to give a presentation going through the background, the task force recommendations, next steps, and then we really want to, I think the focus, we want to allow the time for a Q&A session. So I think with that, I think we're going to kind of just go over some of the instructions kind of with the WebEx format. Sarah?
Sure thing. And also we have Supervisor Alcorn here with us, and I'm not sure, Supervisor, if you wanted to say anything before I get into the instructions.
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, St. Clair. I just want to welcome everybody to this first of many public engagement sessions for the Reston Comprehensive Plan update. I know some of you have been participating actively in the task force process, which recently wrapped up. This is all going to be provided as background, but I just wanted to say thank you to everyone that participated in that effort. And I'm very much looking forward, and thank you to the staff that supported that effort. And I'm very much looking forward to getting into this next phase, which is public feedback and, what's good about this, what's maybe not as good, where could there be improvements, and look forward to hearing everyone's input on that. I will be listening in, although maybe not always with my video screen on, but I look forward to this and all the other outreach sessions. So thanks again, DPD staff.
Thank you, Supervisor Alcorn. We also have several task force members with us who have been integral to this study process. So if you all can virtually raise your hands, or maybe when we get to the Q&A, we can better recognize you and we can see everyone, and you guys can turn on your screen and raise your hands, but I did want to acknowledge our task force members as well. So yes, so before St. Clair dives into the presentation, I'm just going to quickly go over the WebEx instructions. So obviously a big part of this is, community input, feedback, answering your questions. So we will have that Q&A at the end of the presentation. During the presentation, if you have any questions or comments, we recommend you just go ahead and put those in the chat. We have a lot of staff on hand, and staff and even our task force members, if you know the answer to a question that you see in the chat, please feel free to go ahead and respond as the presentation is going. We will get to those too. I'll monitor them. So if there are any unanswered questions in the chat, we'll get to those in the Q&A too. And then for those of you who are calling in on the phone, you're going to want to press *3 to raise your hand during the Q&A to speak, and I will say your name and I'll unmute you, and then you'll be able to speak. If you would like to raise your hand and speak either on your phone or computer, you will look for this hand icon that is on the slide to raise your hand, and I'll do the same thing and call out your name and unmute you so you can ask your question. If you're on like a condensed window or your phone, you might have to tap those 3 dots if you don't see the hand raising option. So just want to call that out, but I think that covers the instructions. So yeah, St. Clair, you can take it away.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. Appreciate that.
St. Clair, could I jump in just a second?
Sure, yes.
I do want to give just one shout out before we dive into this, and I know the topic tonight, the focus is transportation. I do want to give a shout out to the task force lead on this topic area is John Mooney. And I do see John has his hand up. I know later in the process you may be calling on folks, but I did just want to make sure John was recognized for all the tremendous amount of work and production from him and that subgroup. And you're muted.
Thank you, Supervisor Alcor. So before I get into the presentation, I just wanted to mention, as Sarah mentioned, we have several members of the Reston Task Force that are in attendance at this meeting. With me having the presentation up, it starts to see who's on attendance, but I did notice, as was mentioned, John Mooney, Lynn Molston, David Vanell, Shane Murphy. If there are digital task force members that I've missed, I apologize, but they are available as a resource. When we get to the Q&A session, they will also be available to answer questions. We also have multiple staff from the various review agencies that have been a part of this process and who are kind of the topic experts who are also available to answer questions when we get to the Q&A. So just wanted to make people aware of that. Okay, and for the presentation, I am going to turn off my video just so I can make sure I'm covering everything I need to cover. So the 2020 Reston study was authorized to evaluate how new development might impact Reston residents, public facilities, and provide an opportunity to address growth-related issues within Reston. With over 30 rezonings approved since the Reston Comprehensive Plan was last updated in 2015, many in the community had expressed concerns about how new development might affect existing Reston residents, also impact public facilities, and the quality of new development design. So just to give a little background on the comprehensive plan, the comprehensive plan is the primary resource of county staff, the Board of Supervisors, the Planning Commission, and other decision makers for evaluating land use applications and making policy decisions about the county's built and natural environment. The comprehensive plan describes a community's land use, vision, priorities, and goals. Ideally, it represents the full spectrum of the community, young and old, renters and homeowners, minority communities, and all income ranges. The comprehensive plan sets forth areas of the county that are recommended for more development or retention of their existing uses and character, or changes in land use. And the plan includes land use recommendations such as residential, retail, mixed use, office, the amount of development and the character of development. And it includes design details such as building height recommendations, open space networks, and street networks. So for this Reston study, a 31-member task force was appointed by the Hunter Mill District Supervisor Alcorn in March of 2020. The task force meetings were originally scheduled to kick off in March of 2020, but due to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, we had to scramble to find an alternative format for hosting the task force meetings. And as a result, the task force meetings began in May of 2020, and all of the full task force meetings and all of the subcommittee meetings were hosted on a virtual platform, the same WebEx platform that we're using today. The task force was comprised of residents representing neighborhood and community organizations, landowners, and representatives from business associations. The task force and county staff worked closely to discuss and analyze potential changes of the comprehensive plan for Reston, which guides future planning and the land use decisions for the area. The full task force held 58 public meetings between May 2020 and August of 2022. The task force formed subcommittees to review and update and draft proposed recommendations or text for the Reston Comprehensive Plan. County staff from multiple agencies collaborated with the task force to further develop text for the comprehensive plan. And any differences between task force and staff recommendations will be highlighted in the staff report. So the proposed text includes revised language for the existing plan elements or chapters in the adopted or the current Reston plan. And we'll provide an overview of those highlights and key changes. And the text also proposes new plan language for 3 new plan elements for the Reston plan. Those elements or chapters are community health, equity, and economic development. And we will provide an overview of those chapters as we move forward. So the first element or chapter to discuss are the planning principles. So when the Plan Committee of Reston was founded by Robert E. Simon in 1964, he established 7 guiding principles for the development of Reston. Over time, the guiding principles were increased to 10, and the proposed update includes 2 new principles to address community health and equity in Reston. The planning principles were updated to ensure the principles will continue to guide Reston development and result in developments that are harmonious with surrounding neighborhoods. Moving on to land use. The task force reviewed and proposed amendments are intended to extend the legacy of outstanding new town planning in Reston and to ensure that the development potential for Reston, the infrastructure, and the environment are all in balance. The land use, as far as land use changes, there were 4 areas that there are proposed changes. The first is the village centers. The land use recommendations for the village centers, and specifically Hunter Woods, South Lakes, and North Point, were reviewed to consider whether future redevelopment proposals might require a comprehensive plan amendment. And as a result, the proposed language recommends that for the village centers, existing residential located adjacent to the non-residential areas of the village centers will remain unchanged. However, proposals for new housing in the non-residential areas of the village centers will require an amendment to the Reston Comprehensive Plan before consideration. Another area that was looked at was the Town Center North non-TOD district, which is jointly owned by Fairfax County and Inova. This land area is generally bordered by Barron Cameron Avenue to the north, Bowman Town Drive to the south, Town Center Parkway to the west, and Fountain Drive to the east. The proposed recommendations assigns all residential development to blocks 2, 4, and 6, which are the Inova-owned properties. It also recommends a maximum of 1,000 dwelling units and 150,000 square feet of non-residential development for blocks 2, 4, and 6. For blocks 1, 3, 5, 7, 8, and 9, which are the county-owned blocks, those areas are reserved for civic uses with adequate ancillary retail. Another area that was looked at is the eastern section between the TOD and proposed extension of South Lakes Drive and north of the Dulles Toll Road section. This area is south of Sunset Hills Road, north of Reston Station Boulevard, and east of Michael Faraday Court. For this area, plan language was added, which allows a development option for residential development up to a 1.0 FAR. For the Roland Clark Place residential mixed use section, which is located along Roland Clark Place, south of the Dulles Airport Access Road and north of Sunrise Valley Drive, the proposed language would allow the provision of public uses to satisfy the required 25% non-residential uses required on the 2 parcels located south of the Dulles Toll Road, which are currently planned for residential mixed-use development with a total of 75% residential and 25% non-residential. Moving on to transportation, the proposed update to the transportation recommendations include recommendations for expanding the vision for a multimodal transportation system that provides safe, efficient, attractive, and dependable travel options in an equitable way for all current and future residents, employees, and visitors. It includes updating the active transportation and area-wide public transportation guidance, and adding placemaking guidance and modifying the local street network in the TSA areas. The recommendations also include the addition of 8 planning principles related to transportation. I'm not going to go through them all, but they do include to balance future land use with supporting transportation infrastructure and services, providing a complete street network that accommodates all modes of transportation for all users, and to promote the safety, health, and wellness of community members. Moving on to the housing recommendations. The proposed text introduces language encouraging the preservation of existing market and committed affordable housing units across the whole of Reston. It also encourages the expansion of housing options for vulnerable populations in areas within walking distance of transit and supporting services, and encourages the development of senior housing in areas within walking distance of transit, and provide a continuum of care to allow seniors to age in place. As part of the Reston Housing Review, the task force identified 3 follow-on actions for further Reston housing goals. And these include studying the implications of lowering the current average median income categories for sale workforce dwelling units, developing a formal proposal to create a community land trust pilot program in Reston to study the effectiveness and long-term financial implications of such a program to increase the number of affordable housing units, and studying the control period for workforce dwelling units to determine if the control periods for rent and for sale units can be extended. As far as key changes to the housing recommendations, provided on this slide is a table showing the average median income for or AMI targets for rental workforce units countywide within the Reston TSAs and in the Reston non-TSA areas. The draft language includes an update to the AMI targets for rental workforce units within the Reston TSAs and recommends that 6% of the total units be targeted to the 71 to 80% AMI, 3% of the total units are targeted to the 61 to 70% AMI, and 3% of the total units are targeted for the up to 60% AMI. Again, for a total of 12% rental WDUs. The countywide policy is 4% targeted to 71 to 80 AMI, 2% to 61 to 70% AMI, and 2% at the up to 60 AMI. So again, it proposes a change just for the rental units within the Reston transit station areas. The proposed recommendations for the Reston non-transit station areas is consistent with the countywide policy. Moving on to parks and open space. The proposed updates of the parks and open space recommendations seek to advance the following goals. Again, preserving the natural features, including forests, lakes, and stream valleys, providing consistent quality and quantity of parks, recreation, and open space for all residents and employees in Reston, regardless of age, race, and income, and planning for a variety of recreation experiences to serve all ages, backgrounds, interests, and abilities to meet the needs of the culturally and economically diverse community, to provide for indoor and outdoor cultural activities, provide for community gathering spaces, and establish inclusive and equitable community engagement to inform and guide planning for parks, recreation, and open space. As far as key changes to the parks and open space recommendations, the proposed language removes references to parks previously referenced in the Reston Plan, which include Lake Fairfax, Stratton Woods, and Fred Crabtree Park, because they are outside of the boundary of Reston. The proposed language also revises the athletic field guidance for Reston to recommend that based on the population needs as determined by the Fairfax County Park Authority, at least 12 full athletic fields be provided, including 1 in or nearby each of the 3 transit station areas in Reston, through development contributions of primarily land, new facilities, and improvements to increase capacity at existing facilities, and secondarily, funds. Moving on to the environmental stewardship chapter, the proposed recommendations specify an environmentally related vision and planning principles expected to guide development in Reston. They introduced the concept of biophilia and the certification of Reston as a biophilic community. The proposed language offers insight into various environmental issues germane to the community, describes the challenges facing the community, and offers specific recommendations to address Reston's challenges. The draft language addresses the following topics: community design, including ecosystem health and resiliency, sustainable landscapes with regards to soils, vegetation, and invasive plant species, watersheds, water resources, including wetlands, streams and buffer areas, and lakes and ponds, also stormwater management and salt management, and sustainability, including green buildings and green neighborhoods, noise, lighting, electric vehicle charging, and bird-friendly design. regards to the heritage resources recommendations, the proposed language language was added regarding the reconnaissance level architectural survey that was conducted by the Virginia Department of Historic Resources in 2019. The survey included buildings constructed between 1961 and 1978, which were the prime development years for Reston. In addition, a map was added in the text identifying the locations of previous study efforts. Language is also added regarding the recognition of the Association Drive campus as a heritage resource. The campus is significant in community planning and development as part of Robert Simon's original plan for Reston. And given the importance of the Office Park, draft plan recommendations includes language recommending the consideration of preservation and or adaptive reuse with any potential development proposal. And finally, the inventory of historic sites map was updated to include the United States Geological Survey building, which is now listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Moving on to public facilities. Proposed language was added to ensure that the current and planned public facilities will adhere to the principles identified in this plan, including public participation in decision-making, addressing the housing needs of all ages and incomes, ensuring environmental sustainability, and using green technology in facilities. In addition, the public facilities addressed in the plan was expanded to include law enforcement, libraries, health and human services, housing and facilities for homeless population, public recreation and entertainment facilities, water and sewer, and solid waste and recycling. With regards to the public arts recommendations, the public arts recommendations were updated to ensure that developers coordinate public art projects with Public Art Reston early in the design process to ensure that public art is successfully integrated into developer proposals and ensure there is transparency in the Public Art Reston review process. Now moving on to some of the new chapters proposed for the comprehensive plan. Again, the community health chapter is a new chapter for the Reston plan. The proposed community health recommendations aim to ensure that planning and development in Reston prioritizes achieving health equity. The objectives for the community health section of the plan are intended to benefit the health of everyone in Reston, regardless of race, income, age, immigration status, or any other measure. The objectives are provided in 5 interrelated subcategories, which include healthcare and services, active living, food systems, climate, health, green infrastructure and healthy buildings, and social cohesion. Another proposed new chapter is equity. The equity chapter builds on the concepts outlined in the One Fairfax Social and Racial Equity Policy, which was adopted by the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors in November of 2017. This policy commits the Board of Supervisors to consider equity in decision-making and in the development and delivery of future policies, programs, and services. The proposed equity recommendations are intended to continue Reston's long-standing commitment to removing barriers that perpetuate injustice in our society and unite Reston around a shared set of goals for its future, and to use planning to build a more inclusive economy and connect people to opportunity. And the final new chapter proposed is economic development. This chapter is consistent with the current Fairfax County Policy Plan for Economic Development. The economic development recommendations identified as necessary to support land use decisions in the Reston Comprehensive Plan are grouped together. And the recommendations identified as aspirational and which apply to other Fairfax County organizations are also grouped together. These aspirational recommendations would not be required to be addressed as part of individual land use decisions. So that covers the various chapters or elements that have been addressed in the proposed text, which is now kind of released for public review. As far as next steps, again, we are currently in the community engagement phase of things. This is the first of several community engagement meetings that are scheduled. We will be having virtual and in-person meetings, and providing question and answer sessions, and taking in comments from the public. There's also a public comment window that is now open. There is you can access it through the Reston Study website, where anybody can provide comments online, and that window will be open through October 28th. As of right now, given the current schedule, the staff report is scheduled to be published in late September, and the tentative public hearing dates at this point are looking at a Planning Commission date of November 2nd, 2022, and the Board of Supervisors public hearing December 6th, 2022. Again, there's a lot of information that is available on the Reston Study website. You can find information on the task force meetings that were held, links to even videos of those meetings. Again, the public comments link is available on that site, and just a lot of background information on the study. So with that, I think that covers the presentation for this evening. We want to open it up for questions and answers for any of our attendees. So I think with that, Sarah, I'll turn it over to you as far as fielding the questions. Let's see.
I think Sarah's muted.
You. It's a good thing I didn't go too much further. So sorry, I was just saying we do have a question or comment and question from someone. Forgive me if I mispronounce your name, but it's Kripa Petwardan, who says, reducing the presence of cars and space devoted to them is very much in line with the goal of promoting health and wellness for all. Is the task force aware of this?
I think that might be a question. Is John Mooney available for the task? I think he might. Yes. John, did you want to respond to that question?
Yes, and it is probably the most fundamental question that we encountered, not the one we talked about most, but the one that underlay many of our discussions. What we decided to do after much discussion, and there were people with strong views on all sides. Some were wanting to put more limitations on cars, others wanting to not limit them and perhaps even make it easier for cars. So we had great debates within the task force itself. And what we decided to do is not to try to reduce single occupancy vehicle use by coercion. Okay, by limiting signal time for vehicles or by reducing travel lane space for vehicles, but rather to do it primarily by making the active transportation modes and the public transit modes more attractive, reliable, equitably distributed. So it's trying to achieve what this person asked about by attraction rather than coercion. And it was a delicate balance. We did, let me tell you the ways in which we did try to make the active modes of bicycling, walking, skating, whatever, more attractive. We have a much more extensive trail and sidewalk system that we advocate in the plan. We have for example, we have safe routes to schools, which has not been mentioned in previous plans. We emphasize the importance of having the safe routes to school program to make sure that young children or children through K through 12 can walk or bike to school safely. There are many instances of this. So I'll leave it at that. If there are follow-up questions, I'd be happy to answer it. But again, we decided to do this by way of attraction, making the active modes more attractive, reliable, and fairly distributed, rather than massive restrictions on autos. Though the plan is to reduce reliance on autos. That's the plan. But we're doing it by attraction, making the other modes more attractive. Does that make sense?
Well, we're getting some feedback from Kripa, and why don't I unmute you, Kripa? But they say, how does refusing to reduce the number of vehicle lanes not undermine the safety of kids walking and biking to school? Kripa, I'll unmute you too if you would like to add anything to that. You're unmuted.
It's all well and good to make other modes of transportation more attractive, but there is no way you can ignore the piece of disincentivizing driving. Like, that has to be done. Otherwise, we're at the status quo where we encourage driving and every other mode is punished. And I hear that you're not going to reduce the travel lane space for single occupancy vehicles. Well, that makes it that much harder to cross the street as a pedestrian and as a cyclist. So this is, I'm sorry, this rings very hollow to me.
Well, to be frank, Kripa, which I'm sure you want me to be, as I said, there were very strong views on both sides. And this is what we came to because, frankly, we do not sense the political will to do something more aggressive to reduce vehicular.
The mayor of Paris, like, she went ahead and got aggressive, and now Paris is like, the air has gotten so much cleaner. Like, yeah, she got some backlash and she just said, okay, whatever. The same thing happened with the tax on plastic bags. Like, we successfully implemented a 5-cent plastic bag tax. Like, there were years, if not decades, of backlash against that, but now it's been implemented and now people just adjust it and they remember to bring their totes with them when they go to the grocery store. I don't understand how this is any different.
Well, let me tell you why the folks who did not want to be more aggressive toward autos, what concerned them. First of all, there was uncertainty as what was going to happen to public transit, including Metro Rail after COVID. And there was, I heard a discussion on NPR yesterday about the drastic reductions in use of transit. So people were afraid that if transit is declining, we are going to, whether we like it or not, we're going to have to deal with auto traffic. Secondly, people were afraid, genuinely afraid, many of the task force members, about the economic impact of reducing auto traffic. Obviously, people argued the other side too and said if you make it more acceptable to pedestrians and bicyclists, that can increase business in Reston. All I can say is, as we tried to balance things out, Kripa, that this is where we ended. And we are keenly aware that other communities, for example, Los Angeles, California generally, big cities like Paris, London, Holland is famous for it. They have a culture of
Okay, and they dealt with backlash decades ago too.
right.
So I'm really not buying, oh, there's going to be of course there's going to be backlash.
Yeah. I understand your position and I have some sympathy for it. This is the balance point that we arrived at. And I think for where we are in Fairfax County, which does not have a culture, it does not have a strong.
And nor did the Netherlands or Denmark decades ago, but they made the culture.
Okay. I understand your position.
Okay. Well, thank you, Kripa, for your question. Thank you, Mr. Mooney. We want to make sure we allow time for additional questions. Kripa, I would ask you, please, As I mentioned, there is the public comment window that you can access through the Reston study website. So please, yes, provide any comments, concerns that you have, so that staff we can get that and we can take that into consideration. So thank you very much.
We
Any
do
additional
have
questions?
we do have a comment from Jan DeLucian, who says, I'm concerned about proposed traffic changes on North Shore Drive, Old Reston. We've seen increased speeds, and now there is a plan to dump Sunset Hills West / North traffic onto North Shore from Temporary Road. Currently, we have a 30-mile-per-hour limit, but no police enforcement. Rush hour traffic is from the Metro to RTC already high without adding more traffic. And they continue, the concern being random transportation decisions in established neighborhoods with no specific neighborhood discussion. Oh, sorry. And then they say, they just said, correction, not Temporary Road, Sunset Hills through Fannie Mae.
So there are two related questions about traffic through or near the former Fannie Mae property. One is whether or not American Dreamway should become a road publicly accessible to vehicular traffic. That's one. And the second one, which I think was the questioner's or the commenter's primary point, was the proposed link between American Dreamway and North Shore Drive. So it's a distance of about 300, 400 feet to make that connection. So these issues were hotly debated on the task force, and it was only by a very narrow vote that the decision was made to recommend that American Dreamway should be a public roadway open to, or not necessarily a public roadway, but at least a roadway open to public vehicular traffic. I make the distinction between public roadway and the public use of a roadway because many of the streets in town center are private streets, but they are used publicly. So let me talk about the first one, which is the proposed link between American Dreamway and North Shore Drive, something which I myself strongly opposed. But that won in the last vote. In the last vote on October 22nd, it won by one vote. So that's why it's in the plan, that link. The reason for it is that it was proposed by Fairfax County DOT because it would help complete the street grid, the local street grid within the Wheelie Transportation TSA, transportation grid there. And that is to provide multiple ways for people to enter and leave and exit the TSAs. Now, that is the strongest argument for it, I believe. I have a number of concerns about it personally, but in fact it won on the task force's last vote on it by one vote.
Hey, John, can you let John King try to provide a little bit more insight to it since we had kind of helped propose it?
Absolutely.
All right, thanks.
Absolutely.
Hello.
Hi, John. Hi, Michael. And let me say at this point that Mike Garcia and John King, members of the Fairfax County DOT staff, have been our dialogue partners for nearly the full 2 years that we've been working on transportation issues. And we've had many, many long, candid, collegial, and sometimes with strong disagreements, but always collegial conversations. And and we've narrowed the issues down, but there are still some differences. So welcome, Mike, welcome, John, and Mike wants John to say something.
Thanks, John. I certainly agree with everything you said about our working relationship. It's been a pleasure dealing with you and other members of the task force. My name is John King. I'm a transportation planner with Fairfax County's Department of Transportation. So I think we knew that this connection certainly would receive a lot of feedback as part of this public outreach process. We knew through conversations with task force members that there was community concern about this potential connection. So just to maybe clarify up front, I don't want it to seem like this is something that's being already been decided. The task force has decided to recommend it. Part of the process, though, as we're doing now, is public outreach. We want to hear from folks in the community about the recommendations and move from there. So the reason we recommended, DOT staff recommended that connection, we're looking at sort of a constrained network, so to speak, where we're putting in a lot of development. And so the plan speaks to maintaining that balance of land use and transportation modes. So we know there'll be more people likely in the future in Reston, and we want to have the opportunity to provide them with a functioning transportation system. So we look for where we can add connections to make that network more connected, so to speak. And this is a very small connection. Obviously, the folks that live on North Shore Drive would have some concern about future traffic if that connection is established. Now, the thought I had, and I don't know how well this will be received, is that we stepped back and have been trying to plan for one Reston, all of Reston, right? And so I think our thought with this connection, in part, other than improving overall connectivity, was that the folks that are using this potential future connection would likely be Restonians, whether they maybe not necessarily live in that neighborhood, but they most likely would be working or living in Reston. So I don't expect there to be, I would not expect the use of this potential future connection to be folks coming from, parts farther east to go out to Loudoun County, anything like that. I really think it would be more of a locally serving type of connection. So that's one point I guess I'd like to make about it. But the other point is that we do certainly want to hear about specific concerns that the community would have about it, and that's part of this process we're going through now. So really, again, the intent was to step back and look at where we can provide additional connections, increase that connectivity of the local street network, especially near the TSAs where we're expecting more development to come in. And we have sort of just the one east-west main connection now in that area. And so this would provide sort of a smaller parallel facility for folks in Reston to use. Again, local traffic is what we'd expect on it. So hopefully that provides a little bit of clarity, and happy to follow up as needed.
Thank you, John. Jan just requested to speak, so I'm going to unmute her real quick.
Can you hear me?
Jan, you're unmuted.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. My biggest concern about creating more ways for people to get from the TSAs to other places. On North Shore Drive on the south side, the speed limit went from 25 to 30 miles an hour about a year after the metro station opened. People, if you watch the traffic flow up near Temporary Road, where it ends at North Shore Drive, you see people coming down Old Reston Avenue, turning left onto Temporary, and then going right or straight through on Reston Parkway. So we already have significant people trying to come through here on Old Reston towards Temporary Road. I myself, when I'm sitting in traffic, want to say, oh, let me just go through the American Dream Way. If there's no gate there, I can get through. to make it easier because of all the traffic up there. So if we already sort of wish it were there, even as local residents, many TSA users will take this shortcut. Not dropping the speed limit back down to 25 and not enforcing it with the police, we literally have rush hour traffic on North Shore Drive already in both directions. The person from DOT, I'm sorry, I didn't catch the name. But
John.
Sorry. But you said that it's to basically ease the load on the TSA traffic to get people going places. And yes, there are a lot of people that continue on to Herndon. It's not just Reston. It's a small community, and that specific a change should really have some level of public discussion on that alone. The other piece of it is I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the gal who was talking about bicycle. I would have no problem with using this as a test bicycle road. Bicycles coming in and out of there and merging into that traffic that is so heavy during rush hour, I think would be perfectly appropriate for people to realize how much traffic will go through there. I hope that last piece made sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just offer a couple things. I heard you mention the speed limit change, and it sounds like maybe that was not something you think was appropriate. Unfortunately, the county does not establish speed limits. That's not to sort of punt that. I mean, we could talk to the state about it, but that is something that VDOT, the Virginia Department of Transportation, would establish. So if that's a concern, that's something we can talk to them about, but that's not something the comprehensive plan or the county can address.
Yes, please talk to them about it.
Yeah, we can certainly raise that issue, and they they are normally a very good partners. I don't want to speak ill of the state at all. Another note: there is a pedestrian connection that exists, and so the thought was to provide a limited vehicular connection there, not and maintain that, like you said, you're encouraging as a bike road, maintain that existing ped or bike connection. So we would want to take that away. We certainly wouldn't want to take that away with this proposed connection. That was not.
How would you limit the traffic?
How do you limit traffic? Well,
are you saying a traffic limited use of that road?
Oh, well, road design. You would have most likely one lane in each direction. It could be narrower lanes, as another commenter suggested earlier. When you narrow the lanes and how it's designed, that normally makes the car feel uncomfortable about going too quickly. You can also do things with, I don't want to go through the whole list of ways you can affect the driver's perception of their environment, but there are things you can do with roadway design so that the driver doesn't feel like he has free reign to go as fast as he wants. Normally wider lanes with a lot of space around you makes you feel very comfortable in your car. When you constrain that space, whether through design or streetscape or putting people there, the driver will normally not feel as comfortable going quickly, and he just, I think it's just human nature, I suppose.
That's not proving to be the point on this section of North Shore. It's as closely residential as the rest of North Shore Drive, but it was allowed to go up to 30 miles an hour, which still causes close calls for the golf carts that are crossing at the top of the hill and so forth. If you would please talk to DOT, I'd be glad to participate in the discussion. Very glad to. But continued changes to this community where I only found out about this one by accident. So sorry, I'll shut up. I'm just throwing that out there.
So this is Mike Garcia. I just wanted to kind of help out with that. We will talk to VDOT about this and see what we can do in terms of generating a speed study to kind of go back and assess why it was done and see if it makes sense to go back and put it back to what the residents kind of what you're requesting. So we'll see. We'll talk to them about that. The other thing I wanted to kind of mention is that you said there was has been a noticeable uptick in some of the traffic in the area. And you've seen that more kind of occur over the few years. And I will say that that has to do with the Wheelie Avenue station being an end of the line station right now, a temporary end of the line station. So as the phase 2 stations start to open, what we'll generally see is anyone who was kind of going to the Wheelie Avenue station because it was end of the line will find their closest station. So if that is Innovation Center, if that's Herndon, if that's Reston, or even for the Loudoun County folks, if that's in their jurisdiction, they'll start to find those closer stations, which should hopefully help to kind of temper or at least maybe even reduce to some extent all the traffic that you have seen. So I think it's a condition that we're going to monitor, and we do have monitoring efforts to make sure that we're kind of looking at this to see what's going on. So but I just wanted to kind of explain how the expectation is that traffic patterns will change when phase 2 opens, and how those changes will occur. We'll kind of continue to monitor that.
I agree with your expectation about the end of line, and I hope that will reduce some. Is there any way that you all can work with Fairfax County Police to get them to actually enforce? I've talked to the traffic control people and so forth. I think I've seen policemen out there twice. It'd be great for the revenue. They'd be able to write a lot of tickets during lunch and rush hour.
Yeah, so I think what we're going to do is refer that to Supervisor Alcorn, because he can better talk to the police department and getting them there. So that's not actually a DOT enforcement, but we can definitely make sure his office is aware of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to pass that request along, although, contact my office about that, because I know we've actually had a number of requests in different streets for.
All right, I will.
Thank you.
Jen, thank you so much for your question, Fig. We really appreciate it. And again, if you have any additional comments, concerns, please, utilize the public comment window and provide additional feedback. Thank you so much. Sarah, are there other questions?
There is, just since we're on this topic, it looks like there's one comment and question related. Diane Palmentera says, this is the first time I'm hearing about this. We live off of North Shore and we are very against dumping more traffic onto North Shore. Also, to what extent did private developers weigh into this recommendation?
So I'll let Fairfax County DOT take the first response to this.
Sure. Thank you, John. Yeah. So the short answer is this was a staff department county staff recommendation that we proposed. We asked for the task force's feedback. We wanted to know what they thought of it. We had several discussions about it. And ultimately, as John Mooney indicated, there was a very close vote, and it was established as a task force recommendation. So that's the genesis of it. We didn't engage with I think the term was private. Was it private development? The concept was generated by county staff. It was discussed by the task force, and then the task force voted upon it.
Might I comment here? This is Gary Maupin. I was on this task force. I did miss the 22nd meeting because I was overseas. It was only the second one I've missed of those 58. But I certainly share some of Jan's concern, but completely respect that vote. But,
Gary, could you speak louder?
Yes. My name is Gary Maupin. I'm on this subgroup with John. I missed a 22nd meeting because I was overseas. While I share some of Jan's concerns about this, I think we had, as John King just expressed, a vote, and we need to respect that vote because we have people on this from the county especially that really are top-notch and trying to do the right kind of job on this. On the other hand, for John and Mike, I think you're still looking at this. My recollection from our last discussion is you're not trying to make this a final decision now, but you're looking at what the community wants on this. If you could comment on that, John and Mike, that's my recollection from our last conversation.
Yes, Gary, that certainly is the process. So I guess for the general public's clarification, what we're discussing now is the result of 2+ years of very hard work by dedicated Restonians, and they've put forward a set of recommendations. Included in that larger set of recommendations is this, connection between North Shore Drive and American Dream Way. And what we're doing now is reaching out to the larger public and asking for feedback. We want to hear, obviously, concerns, issues that you see with any of the recommendations, including this one we're talking about now. So that's the process we're in. So I certainly don't want folks to think that this has already been decided and put into the county's policy and comprehensive plan. It's that's the process right now, is receiving feedback. So we want to hear from you, and this is really good feedback we're getting tonight.
Well, John, just to follow up on that, I think as we talked, beyond the feedback that we're getting here in this process, you all on this particular issue, we're still going to be looking at, as you talk to the task force and subgroup on the community view. I don't mean just this. When you go to implement this particular action, I think it was Mike that was talking about this, you're going to see what the people in this area really felt about this. If I can recall that, Mike, so you might just comment on that.
I mean, yes. So, I mean, what we're saying is it was proposed by staff and looked at and recommended by the task force. So we are using this opportunity to kind of see if the community engages. But I mean, we thought this was a worthy kind of connection to kind of add to the plan because it kind of created the network that allowed for it to be there. So this is kind of our proposal. So we want to hear what everyone has to say. So that's kind of happening now.
Okay. Sorry if I misunderstood that, Mike.
My understanding is that the task force has kind of made their recommendation, and so this is the next step in the process.
And again, this is St. Clair Williams, DPD again. I just want to confirm, yes, again, this is the goal. This is the community outreach phase. This is, again, we really want to get and hear the feedback from the community. Again, what is been worked on, and again, is the proposal at this point. And yes, the feedback is important to, again, nothing is final at this point. There will be, down the road, there will be public hearings. So again, this is the opportunity to get the feedback. The task force has been deeply involved, but we want to hear from the greater community as well. So please, yes, we appreciate the feedback we're hearing tonight, but yes, it's important to provide that feedback so we can be aware of, again, what the concerns and feelings are out there. Thank you.
Thank you.
St. Clair, if I could just add on real quick to that, the discussion we're having tonight is very important, but I'd also encourage everyone to submit written feedback through the portal to document exactly what you want to say. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much, John. Sarah, any additional questions?
Yes, we have a comment from Yavuz Ananli. Sorry, my poor attempt to say her name. Okay. Attraction versus corrosion seems like a distraction, as we have seen that we have installed infrastructure for other modes of transport. We have seen them used a la the bike lanes in Reston, but to make Port safe, attractive to bikers and others, that means auto has to give some space, in that, of course, post 1950s cars have gotten priority, and having cars lose a little bit gets it close to historical normal. Are there any comments or response to that?
One thing I will say is that the new plan recommends a lot more off-street dedicated trails to bicycles than in the previous plan. So completing the trail system along major roadways so that people can safely travel not in the streets. So I know some bikers prefer to ride in the streets, but many prefer to ride not on the streets, but on dedicated or shared trails with pedestrians. And so the plan recommends a lot more trails of that sort to make it easier for bicyclists.
I'd just like to add on, again, compliments to the work, in my opinion, that the task force has done. Something that they did was bring together active transportation recommendations, including the bicycle and the pedestrian facilities, along with streetscape recommendations to make corridors sort of have a more holistic appearance in the plan. And then it is basically summarized. So these are some of the changes. I saw another question in chat. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but so the current plan has text and graphics. This plan that the task force is putting forward, the recommendations, has the text, which encompasses roadway recommendations, active transportation facility recommendations, and streetscape recommendations along significant corridors. So you're bringing all those together in one place. So you get a very clear picture of the desire to have a complete multimodal transportation network along these significant corridors in Reston. I think that was very, very well done by the task force.
Thank you, John, for saying that. And let me direct folks' attention. They can find the full comprehensive plan online, but there is as John said, there is a textual presentation of the proposed changes, and there is a tabular presentation of the changes. And the tabular not only talks about the transportation aspects, but also talks about the placemaking aspects. So we say we wanted to make this attractive. Placemaking is the attempt to make active modes of transportation clear to use by good signage and pleasant to use by good design. And so I would recommend that folks, if they want to see all of these changes put together in a graphic way, look at the table on pages 80 through 82 in the plan, and you'll see all those, and you'll see how many additions there are to either dedicated bike trails or shared bike and pedestrian trails. And let me come back to the placemaking. One of the reasons why Holland and other countries like that were able to develop a culture of active transportation is they made it not only bikeable, but they made it beautiful. They made it attractive. And we believe that if we have a whole section new in this version, this year, transportation transportation chapter in the comp plan. We believe that if we can make it beautiful and clear, like, how do you get to the WNOD trail, from various parts of Reston? If we have clear signage, and if we have placemaking that makes it beautiful, that will make it attractive. That will make it attractive. So we've tried to, as I say, increase the facilities for bicyclists and pedestrians, make it clearer how this connects with all other parts of Reston, including the transit stations, and then make it beautiful and attractive so that you like doing it. That's how you change culture.
Thank you, John. Appreciate the feedback. Sarah, the next question.
If Alex K says, will these trails be straight and flat? The current one along Barron Cameron is incredibly hilly and twisting, very dangerous for bikers and pedestrians.
John King, would you address that? Because we actually confronted that issue on Barron Cameron. I believe we decided not to complete one side, but rather to do an alternate route on the other side, precisely because of topographical issues like that. John?
Thanks, John. Yeah, so I guess the general response would be that the engineering.
John, your sound is very broken up.
Sorry, I was not muted. Okay. Can you hear me now?
It's not coming through clearly, John.
Maybe if I turn. Oh, sorry. Is that working? No.
Unfortunately, it isn't. I don't know what's going on.
Might maybe.
So I can't address, this is Mike Garcia. I can't address what John Mooney asked John King to weigh in, but what I can say is that, through the engineering, we generally try not to do these twists and turns and everything like that. We try to make them a little bit more straight, a little easier to use, and then to the extent that we can kind of overcome some grades, we'll try to do it. But our intent is not to make them bend back and forth and all those other kinds. So, where we do run into grades, we try to figure out alternatives. Sometimes if developments come through and there's development along an area, we can meander a easier pass through a development, but still leave the other one kind of there. John, do you want to try again?
Yeah, hopefully that's better. Nope. Okay. Apologies.
Maybe leave and come back in. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
The same person. Oh, go
I
ahead.
would just say that John King and I discussed this particular case at Barron Cameron in detail, but John knows the detail much better than I, so hopefully he can return and explain it. But as I believe it was on the north side that the trail was discontinuous and difficult to travel, and therefore, well, I'll let John hopefully come back and address it. But it's a very important question which we recognized.
So one popped up real quick from Lynn Molson, and it says our trails subject to ADA regulations. And I only bring it up because it's right in the context of this discussion. Trails follow the grades of the road. So if the road is kind of, doing a big hill and everything, the trail will generally tend to follow that, assuming that it's kind of along the path of the road. If it deviates from the road, then it needs to follow ADA accommodations, which is like there's max grade percentages of I think 3%, and then when you exceed it to a certain percent, you have to have flat landings, and then sometimes you even need railings at times. So all those kind of kick in when you start to leave the roadway. And I would just say it's existing roadway. It's sometimes, but it also depends on topography as well.
Thank you, Mike. And I just want to take this moment just to point out for any folks with questions, if there are any questions, if we're unable to provide, full response, during this meeting or reading it, we will try to follow up and provide, those answers. We will be providing some follow-up, answers on the Reston Study website, following the meeting. So again, we try to provide the feedback or answer questions during this meeting, but if there's anything where we can't get all to you now, we will provide follow-up. Thank you. Sarah, any other questions?
The same person had a related comment and question. I just lost my place. Okay. Alex K says any walkable areas should be about two thirds shaded too. It is incredibly unpleasant to walk in the sun for long periods of time. And then they had a question as well. Are there any plans to use continuous sidewalks and/or more pedestrian tunnels?
Pedestrian sidewalks, and what was the last part of that sentence?
Continuous sidewalks and or more pedestrian tunnels.
More pedestrian tunnels. We do discuss the desirability of pedestrian tunnels in where feasible, especially where there are difficult, challenging intersections. So when you have wide streets that need to be navigated, but we all know how so we state in the plan that where feasible and called for, pedestrian tunnels should be considered. So that is in the plan, but it is a massive cost, and so we do not prescribe it any particular place. John King or Mike Garcia, do you want to talk about? As for the shade, I don't know that well enough. The only thing I can say is that in our Parks and Open Space plan, we emphasize not just the desire, but the need, not only to maintain our current total tree canopy, but increase it. And I think we have a goal of what, 45 or 48%? Is that right, Lynn? But anyway, it's a very high goal that we're aiming for. So we're trying to increase shade, but I don't know that we can guarantee, I know that we cannot guarantee that all the paths will be as fully shaded as pedestrians and bicyclists would like. But we're trying to maintain our tree canopy and increase it. John, do you have anything to say about the other question?
Yeah, hopefully my audio is better.
Perfect.
Yes.
Great. Okay, so yeah, just to add on to what John said, there is supportive language that goes into that concept of providing a more holistic vision for corridors. So there's language from the placemaking point of view along a number of corridors about the treescape. That implementation, I think maybe I could get St. Clair or someone from DPD to talk about that portion, the trees themselves. I know they certainly go together, right? Like when you put a sidewalk in, like the commenter said, you would like shade. It's much more pleasant environment, and so that all goes together. And in my opinion, there is language. I need some shade myself right now. There is language that goes into supporting that in this plan.
Yes, and John, I just wanted to add on. So for the Reston Transit Station area, there are design guidelines. They are separate from the comprehensive plan, but they are reviewed with any development applications that come in. And again, the street trees, plantings, shade trees, those are all part of the streetscape recommendations that are included in the design guidelines.
And I'll say that we do want continuous sidewalks. We don't want we don't want a gap in the network, both sides of the street.
Thank you very much. Sarah, are you seeing any more questions?
I just see one more from Jan DeLucian, who says, why aren't affected neighborhoods contacted about recommendations for this public period? I can take a stab at this one as the person who's been trying to get the word out. We are working with our neighborhood and community services team to try to get this on as many people's radar, and we've been using various forms of email notifications and social media, and tapping into the Supervisor Alcorn's communications channels as well to get the word out. So if there's any suggestions on that front, or if there's any way that you want to help us get the word out, that would be very much appreciated. And we're looking into some in-person meetings as well that are on our calendar too. Oh, and then I see Jan just said I meant required by developers.
So is notification required of developers for things like this?
Oh,
Can I clarify my question, if I may? I'm so sorry.
yes, please.
Developers are required to contact the interested parties around their lot that they're planning to do, and they do so by certified mail and so forth. I wouldn't care about changes to something in South Lakes, but I care about the one here. Maybe a mail out to the communities around where a change has been proposed might be appropriate. Not certified, just hard copy.
Could you clarify that, please? Are you suggesting just as developers are required to notify, in this case, the county should be required to notify? Or I'm not sure exactly what point you're making.
That was exactly the point I'm making.
Okay.
That if Fairfax County wants to make a change to a specific neighborhood, then that neighborhood should receive physical mail. Doesn't have to be certified type mail, but physical mail to all those people in that immediate area.
I hear you, and I think yes, when you're dealing with area plans that are just focused on specific areas, I think that is what is done. In this case, this comprehensive plan is for the entire Reston community. So I think that is why we're working to work with, you know, NCS and others to make sure we're reaching out and trying to get as much information out there. Because as you can understand, a mailing effort to the entire Reston community would be pretty significant. But again, we are working on ways to make sure we're getting this information out. I just want to point out, and this is the first of, this is the first meeting. So, we're hoping that this will kind of start and getting more awareness out there so that people can have an opportunity to be involved and provide their feedback.
I did try going through the link to the text plan, and I've been going through it for the past 5 minutes, and I still haven't found the one about the North Shore Drive. So I think a text only, because they're in different places, like one's planned space, one's here, one's there, that a way to identify the specific little changes would be, I'm computer literate and I can't find it yet.
Okay, thanks for the feedback. I think we can look at, yes, ways we can highlight where there are changes. We can definitely take a look and see if there's a better way of communicating that for folks.
St. Clair, that this excellent question gives me an opportunity to point out one other thing that's, I think, significantly different in this comprehensive plan, this proposed version of the comprehensive plan compared to the 2014-15 version. And that is that in collaboration with our colleagues in Fairfax County DOT, and the encouragement of our fellow task force members, we do have, I think, at least four places where we say that major roadway changes should be implemented in a manner that supports multiple modes of transportation, like walking and riding, and it's also provide to accommodate environmentally sensitive areas, and to ensure their design is sensitive to the areas and communities they serve. And it also enjoins on the county enjoins on itself the responsibility to engage the affected communities to discuss this throughout the design process. That occurs on pages 74. It occurs twice on page 75. I think it occurs on page, anyway, it occurs 4 or 5 pages. So we've included this emphasis that, especially in case of widenings, one is an intersection change that would affect one of our communities at the intersection of Sunrise Valley Drive and Fairfax County Parkway. So this stress on doing it in a sensitive way to cause the least disruption both to nature and to the human communities that are there, and also the participation throughout the planning process of the people to identify the issues and alternatives. And I will tell you that having worked with Fairfax County DOT on this, I am convinced that from all the way up through Fairfax County DOT and the top of the organization, these folks do not want to do what they consider what might be considered unnecessarily road widening. They do not want to do that. And we put in here community processes to make sure that the community takes part in it. Now that's slightly different from the question that woman focused on, but it shows the spirit of it.
I totally agree that the spirit of communication and community involvement is incredibly fantastic and unusual for many areas. My concern is more on the basis of, as I'm looking through it, there are a lot of small changes suggested in there. And each area has changes, but they're for the same area where another place has changes. Another section has changes, and this one has changes down here. And there are also changes for for Sunset Hills up here. So maybe even just an index in the back to where the changes are, so you can look for North Shore Road and find it. I know indexes for very large documents are insane, but
That is the purpose of the table on pages 80 through 82. So where it says, so it has several columns, and the two last columns are planned vehicular travel lanes, which shows changes in the number of lanes, and then other specific recommendations on bicycle and pedestrian facilities, trails, and placemaking. You find changes there. So I think if you look at those two columns, the second last, or pardon me, not the second last, it's actually the third and the fourth columns, let me refer to it in that way, you will see the changes, and you will see them all gathered in one place. I think it's the most helpful, orderly way we could have done it, because it shows you all of the changes from all aspects of this, all in the same place. Does that make any sense?
it does make sense, but I'm looking at 80 through 82, and even under minor arterials, there's no reference. I tried going for Sunset Hills. I tried going for any of them, and I don't see it in that chart at all.
I'm sorry, you don't, can you tell me?
The North Shore extension piece from American Dream Way, I don't see it in here anywhere.
Yeah, that's right. Where it is, where that is, and it's because the changes are so many that where you find it is on page 82, at the very bottom of page 82, local streets inside the TSAs, and you so it talks about the
But nothing in there tells me that they're going to put a road through my backyard.
right, and the way you find that is on in the textual description, which is longer on page 78, and it refers to the little maps on page 79. And that's where if you look, you can see where the connections are made between American Dreamway, proposed to be made between American Dreamway and North Shore Drive. So the Wheelie Local Street Grid.
If I could make a suggestion from a communication perspective, looking at the grid includes the existing local street grids as well as the proposed ones, as far as I can tell looking at it.
So the blue ones are the proposals and the rest are the existing.
Okay.
Which is what the legend tries to
yes, you're right. It does show under proposed. I was looking on the wrong side of Sunset Hills. But the point being, I would never have known to look here. Nowhere in there is the word North Shore Drive and, you know, whether it's American Dream Way or anything like that. And I think that's the type of detail that would be useful for people to know what changes are happening.
Jan, thank you for the feedback. I think what you're saying is just kind of a way of highlighting the changes for anybody, especially who hasn't been a part of the process, to really understand and be able to highlight, like, oh, does that impact, you know, where they live or things like that? That is what you're talking about, correct?
Exactly.
Okay. So yeah, we hear you. I think we can internally discuss and see, you know, what options we have to make it a little easier for folks to be able to like clearly be able to see and highlight what the changes are. So thank you very much for your feedback.
And I'm very sympathetic to your point of view, especially for this particular one, which, as I've said, I'm not a fan of. But the point is, as you look at these three grids on page 79, there are so many changes. How do you describe them all? You know, how do you know what will be neuralgic to whom? Now,
at least putting the names of the roads in an index would be useful. That's my.
Okay. I hear you, and we'll see what we can do about it.
Thanks, John.
All right. Thank you. Sarah, are there any more questions?
It looks like we have one more.
Okay.
And then I know we are coming up on time. I will put my email address in the chat too. If anyone has follow-up questions, just reach out to me and we will get you answers. But Alex K says, is there any plan for the Lake Anne area in particular? There is a newly built senior condo building across the street from the plaza, but there is no convenient pedestrian access. The sidewalks cut off, there aren't good crossings, and several places where you have to walk in the street to go around corners.
So I'll take a crack at that because I, until recently, served on the Reston Association Board of Directors and was intimately involved with our multimodal transportation advisory committee in discussing precisely that situation. And indeed, our protests got a better configuration of the pedestrian crossing there than had been originally installed. So there was an improvement. We asked for more improvements. That is what we were able to get. This is not in the jurisdiction of Fairfax County DOT, but rather of Virginia Department of Transportation. And we, through Reston's wonderful Chief Operating Officer, Larry Butler, we held many very frank conversations with Fairfax, with VDOT on this. The board of directors sent letters to VDOT on this. There were some important improvements, but we still think it is less than fully desirable. So that's all I can say about that, unless, again, Fairfax County DOT has no direct jurisdiction on this. They talk to VDOT a lot, but I don't know whether you, Mike, or you, John, have anything to add here.
Well, I think we can certainly take any feedback about missing connections or problematic pedestrian facilities. I think this process in particular, I don't think like Lake Anne was included in the land use review specifically. Is that right, St. Clair? That was a decision.
Yes, that is correct. As I mentioned earlier, there were just 3 of the village centers that were a part of this particular study, and Lake Anne is not a part of this study.
Right. This was done separately from the comprehensive plan process. This was part of the construction plan for the new residential facility, and they installed this horrible pedestrian island, which was very confusing, very awkward, and then we did the process I just described and got a few changes. It's better, but it's not everything we hoped for.
Yeah, and let me just jump in, John. So this reminds me, this is a legacy zoning approval from several years ago, but it reminds me a little bit of in Town Center, there's Stratford House that's on the other side of Reston Parkway from the core of Reston Town Center. I remember when that proposal went through the zoning process, it did not have a crosswalk. But then when the residents moved into Stratford House, they basically raised heck and pointed out that it was ridiculous for them to have to walk the distances and the multiple crossings to get to Reston Town Center, which was one of the reasons they bought the condos there in the first place. So there is a crosswalk there now. I did myself notice recently 2 senior citizens trying to jaywalk, if you will, right in front of the house. I agree. This is we need to look at that, and that's something my office will talk with VDOT about as well. And now that we have folks living in the new Lake Anne house, I also will reach out to Fellowship Square, to those officials, and see if they are having any discussions with VDOT as well.
Thank you, Supervisor Alcorn. Sarah, any more questions?
No more questions.
Okay.
St. Clair, this is and Sarah, this is David Vanel.
Yes.
If I could just add a couple of things about the notification process, I just want to highlight the fact that you folks, DPD, produced a 2-page flyer, and you've got you've got notifications on Facebook and things like that. Is there some way that you can expand that to make sure that as many people as possible? I'm certainly there's some people who live in Reston who just simply, don't care and don't want to participate in something like this. But is there some way that you can expand that the field of how you're handling notifications for these call outs, these public hearings? You're muted.
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, do you want to go, St. Clair?
Yeah, I was going to kind of defer to you anyway. So.
Okay. Yeah, we're trying to get the word out as much as we can. I know that Supervisor Alcorn's office will be at the Reston Multicultural event. I believe it's this weekend, passing out some flyers. And then I did mention earlier too, we're working with our neighborhood and community services team to get the flyers out in different community or different public areas throughout Reston. So we're
Have you had enough activity interaction with the local Reston press? You know, like
yes,
Patch
we did.
and those.
Yes, we did. Working with Lisa with Supervisor Alcorn's office, we did a media briefing last week, and several members of the media were there. And I believe that most of them have already put out some stories with information about this outreach period and the draft text that's up for public comment. So yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. I want to make it clear that the reason the supervisor is having these meetings is to make sure that as many people as possible have a say in what this looks like. You know, the task force members of the task force, you know, worked and argued and yelled at each other for 2 years about stipulations in this document, and I don't quite know how you solve the problem of the particular street or the particular intersection drawing the attention of the person who's affected by whatever is going to happen on that intersection, but other than just getting into it and reading it. But this isn't a steamrolled process by any means by the county to kind of have their way with this. They're actively seeking, you folks are actively seeking out what the public wants to do. Task force has had its say, and it's only a recommendation. And hopefully the county, hopefully the citizenry will take enough interest in this to comment and to press for changes that they deem necessary. So anyway, thanks for all your efforts.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burnell. So at this point, just any other task force members that have anything to say, any comments before we?
St. Clair,
Yes.
may I mention one more thing?
Sure.
And Jan, was it you who was talking about putting the names of the affected grid streets into an index? Was it you?
Yes, it was.
Okay, I'm gonna talk with my colleagues at Fairfax County DOT to see what we can do. Let me tell you, one of the things that we're dealing with is that some of the proposed streets that you see in blue there are not existing streets. They are proposed streets in approximate locations. Now, that is not the case, for example, with the proposed link between American Dreamway and North Shore Drive. But one of the problems in doing it for all of them is that limitation that these are, we stress in the text that these are conceptual locations. Many of the places will have streets only after redevelopment. John King, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think that's very well put, John. The thought I have is I guess that again, we've been working for a couple years with this smaller, focused group. So they're very familiar with the issues. The best thing I can say to do is, I think as David said, is to take a look at the document. I mean, that's a hard ask for folks that work on this day to day, but I guess it's basically a tough nut to crack, because I think throughout this process, if you're not very much engaged and aware of all the goings-ons, there may be something that affects you that you're not aware of, unfortunately. So I would say, be engaged. You're here tonight. That's perfect. Talk to your neighbors. I think we as the county would like to make a very robust outreach effort, and we're initiating that now, and we're taking feedback on how to do it and maybe do it better. And so hopefully we'll get the word out to as many people as we can, and we'll have many more eyes and many more comments and feedback, and it'll make the process better overall.
Yeah, let me just restate, but you agree with me that these blue lines are largely conceptual, so it's
Oh.
hard to do an index of lines which are conceptual new streets.
Yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing, is that if we to try and categorize these and give them labels, I don't know how effective that would be, to be honest with you. My thought is that you sort of just need to look at the grid map, the local street network maps, and try and provide comments via reviewing the proposed local street network.
You were just
So-
talking about they're largely conceptual with,
That's correct. They're
does
not
that mean
necessarily,
that they are going to happen? In other words, what turns them from conceptual to reality? What step?
Can I jump in real quick? So this
so.
is Mike Garcia. So what you see on the map is kind of a plan recommendation. There are some that we can categorize in terms of extensions, which make a little bit more context to the community. There are others that kind of we put a line on the map, a couple lines, and we want the development to understand that when they come through with development in the area, we're expecting there to be a walkable grid, a bikeable grid, but a street grid that supports the development in that particular area. So when you're asking about what turns them from conceptual to actually built is when we get development applications that will turn a lot of those streets into actual real streets. So that's how that generally happens. Now, not all the blue lines you see on that particular sheet are expected or anticipated to be constructed by developers. There will be times when public will actually come in and build some of those segments as well. So we kind of have a mix of it, but for the most part, how we turn those conceptuals from the plan that you see into actual streets kind of happens with development, and we see development applications.
so we'll, Jan, in short,
Sorry.
we'll do our best. We understand your concern, and your concern is that people living in the community know that something might affect their neighborhood. How will they come to know that without with any clarity? And we understand that. I would
Maybe
be
just
happy.
an index to that map. And this can go offline too. In the case of this North Shore piece, the developer is going to be starting work. That was approved by the Board of Supervisors. So the development of that area is imminent. So that's my major concern there.
Yeah.
Can I
But
answer that
the-
one too, real
Go
quick?
ahead.
The Fannie Mae applications you're referring to did not include that link in their application. They will not build that app. They will not build that link. So what I talked to about public money needing to be used to somehow connect some of these connections. That might be one where we have to do it. Now we don't have any funds for it. We're not trying to do it anytime soon. We're just actually putting out the idea right now to see if it makes it into the plan. From that point, we'll continue to monitor development. And if sometime we feel that it's an appropriate one and the community is kind of working with us, then we'll go ahead and put it in. But there's still a process even after this planning document to put these streets forward to have them built.
And your clarification on Fannie Mae took a huge, I can't tell you how big a weight that took off my shoulders, that it's not going to happen then.
Yeah, it's just not in their proffers.
Yeah. Jan, if you would like to chat with me further about that, please feel free to call me.
I think
Okay,
you have my email also.
give it to me, please. Or do you want to?
I'll send it to you, John. It's Lynn.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Lynn.
Could I just add a point? Sorry, Sarah, I did have my hand raised, so I was just wondering, my interjection is appropriate at this point, if I may. I think that, in hearing what Jan is asking about the conceptual grid of streets, I think this is something that this community went through with what we call the road from nowhere that just automatically appeared that ran parallel to the Washington Old Dominion Trail along the Fourth Fairway at Hidden Creek. And it really created so much angst amongst the community. Even though you're saying that it's just a conceptual road, people don't interpret it that way. So I think that, you know, I think it's important for people to understand that this is not planned, because we are still dealing with the angst. Those of us that are working as civic leaders, we're dealing with that angst amongst the community members. So I just wanted to add that it's a good idea to, you know, make that clear. And I really do appreciate that you all are listening to the voice of the community. So thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Appreciate the feedback.
And thanks, Lynn, for putting me in contact with Jan. Thank you.
All right, so I wanted to take this moment just for our staff. Any comments from staff members? Okay, with that, hearing none. Okay, just want to remind everybody again, I think Sarah had provided a link to the Reston Study website in the chat. Please take a look at that. There's a lot of information on there. There's also access to the public the public feedback link. Again, please, we want to hear your feedback. So for those who provided feedback tonight, thank you. If you have additional feedback, please provide it. Also, Sarah provided an email address. If everybody has, needs any follow-up on questions, please provide that. As was mentioned tonight, please, again, this is the first meeting, let your neighbors know this is going on. Again, we want to get feedback. We have another one of these meetings tomorrow evening. So you can let people know. They can access the WebEx link to join in. The schedule of meetings is also available on the Reston Study website. So please take a look at that. So again,
Hey, St. Clair,
yes,
sorry,
Lynn.
I just want to add something. I just want to thank you and county staff for all of the work that you all have done to bring this to fruition. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been.
I agree.
It's a long haul.
Yeah, and it's
I
been an
agree.
extraordinary team
Yeah.
effort. I'm definitely thankful for the
Thank
team
you
of
all so
staff we
much.
have for this effort. So yeah, thank you very much. So with that, everybody, thank you for your time. Thank you for your feedback, your input. We appreciate that. And again, please take a look at the website. Feel free to provide comments. And again, please follow up with us if you have any, if you need any follow-up answers. So thank you for your time and have a very good evening. Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.